Hello, my name is Abram Darnser, and I'm a Senior Application Consultant for CM First. And today I'm going to be talking about mobile design challenges that Plex users generally have to face when moving their application to the mobile environment. This is all going to be using Web Client Mobile, but this can also be applied to general Sencha Touch applications as well, a lot of this anyway. So the first thing I want to talk about is the product that we use, Web Client Mobile. It's a multi-platform mobile solution for Plex. Basically, it can take your Plex model and bring it to the mobile environment for very little effort, with very little effort and cost. So you can convert an old Plex screen like that into the nice, beautiful HTML5 JavaScript screen that you see here. So all this is built using Sencha Touch. Sencha Touch is a JavaScript framework that can mimic native functionality. So the idea is that you create an HTML5 JavaScript app that looks and feels like an iOS app, like an Android app, like a Windows Phone app. And it's a lot cheaper and easier to do because you're only developing one app. You don't have to develop anything platform specific, so you can deploy one app and it'll work on all devices. So as you create a Web Client Mobile application, what is that? When you're done, what do you actually have? Well, out of the box, it's just going to run as a web app, and you deploy it as a WAR file, which is a web archive file on a web server. I like to use Tomcat. That's my personal preference, but you can certainly use any of the other ones, WebSphere, etc. So a lot of people who are new to Web Client, they're like, okay, I don't understand what this WAR file is or how I create this. Well, it's actually incredibly simple. It's done through the Eclipse environment. So here is my mobile application. To create a WAR file, all I simply do is do export, web WAR file, and then I just say where I want it to go. And all it's going to do is then package everything up as it would run in my local environment, package everything up into one convenient file, and you just deploy that out to your web server, and your application is now available. And your Sencha Touch application will scale depending on what your device is. So one of the big things that you have to think about with developing for mobile is you don't want any hard sizes or hard positions, because screen resolutions and device sizes change from device to device. So it's not something you can consistently bet on. So one of the main challenges, the main thing that you have to think about when you are creating your mobile application, especially from a Plex application, is how am I going to use this limited screen space? How am I going to display all this information to the user in a very nice, concise manner that's very user-friendly and still highly functional? So sometimes you may want to create a whole new screen. Other times you're trying to convert existing screens. So you want to think of how you have to break all that up. So the first thing you really need to think about is, what type of device am I creating this for? Is this for the general public? Is this going to be used on a phone? Is this going to be used on a tablet? Is this only going to be used by my corporation, where I can control what device the user has? They're out in a warehouse somewhere and they're using a specific tablet, so I know the kind of screen real estate I have to work with. So you have to consider all of these things when designing your screen. So if you're designing for just a phone, you have to make things smaller and more concise and not have a giant page where the user's scrolling for 5 minutes where they're trying to find what they want. Or if you're on a tablet, I can put a big array of fields because I have so much more screen space to work with. So really think about that before you start designing your screens. And you also want to reorganize the flow of screens to fit more in the mobile environment. So if I have a process that takes several steps that you had running in a bunch of tabs, maybe you want to inherit from that and break those up into several screens and have them flow differently between each other. So that's another thing you really have to think about. So Plex's inheritance really makes breaking these things up a lot easier, because if I have one screen with a lot of functionality that I need to break up, well, I can just inherit from it several times and break and just show and hide what I need for each particular screen and break it up that way, and I don't have to write any new code really. So one of the questions I always get asked is, how do I get this on the App Store? I have this web app, I have this WAR file floating out there I can access through a URL. How do I get this into the App Store or onto a physical device? Well, what we use is something called Apache Cordova or PhoneGap. It's the same name for the same product. You'll hear it kind of fluctuate back and forth between the two. So basically, this is a mobile development framework that allows for the JavaScript application to communicate with the actual mobile device and a lot of the device-specific things. It supports iOS, Android, Windows Phone, BlackBerry, a bunch of others that I've never even used. So it's very highly supported. Use it to wrap your application and then deploy it to the store. The wrap application can access device-specific functionality, global positioning, cameras, device storage, just general microphone, a lot of different things. And then the other thing you should know is there's a large community of developers out there creating new plugins. So if you have something that you're trying to do, odds are there's somebody that's already kind of had that problem too, already has a solution out there. So you have a large resource that you can kind of look to get a lot of this stuff done. So using Cordova with Web Client Mobile, it's a little different. When you're developing, when you're setting up your app to be deployed, what you're actually setting up, well, it depends on the platform. If you're developing for Android, you're going to be in Eclipse, and you're going to create these Android projects. And if you're developing for iOS, you're going to do an Xcode and Visual Studios if you want to do Windows Phone. But the thing is these applications are completely separate from your Web Client Mobile applications. They don't even have to be in the same workspace. So basically what's going to be happening is you're going to have a Cordova project out there. Let's just stick with Android as an example. In an Eclipse workspace somewhere, and it's just in one file in there. You just say, I want to point, after the device sets up and everything is initialized, I just want to point to my new, to my existing web application, and then you connect to it from there. And on that deployed web application, you can have all sorts of Cordova functionality. The only thing you really need is to reference the Cordova.js file in your deployed WAR file, and everything can kind of communicate within itself. Developing templates for Cordova is also not as hard as it sounds. You develop it in the exact same way you would any other normal web client mobile template. We use the same markups, similar syntax. It's all just JavaScript code, and I'll be showing some examples of that going forward. So it's not as scary as it sounds. You would think you'd have to learn a whole new system. You really don't. It's all the same kind of markup language. The templates look exactly the same for the most part. So it's a lot easier than you would think. So the way you would do this is, like I said, you create your projects. So we'll stick with Android, like I said. You'll create your projects in Eclipse, and then you add your plugins for what Cordova functionality that you want. So let's say I just want to wrap the application for the App Store. I don't need to access the camera. I don't need any of these other things. Well, then I just wrap the application and then just deploy it as normal. I don't need to install any plugins at all. If I want to access the camera, then I just install the plug-in camera. If I want to do any other functionality, I just install the plugins for those specific things. So it's you get to pick and choose what you want, and it keeps things very small and organized. And you can minimize the size of your file that needs to be installed, what permissions you need to ask for the user. For instance, to access their camera, you have to ask for device permissions, obviously. So you can really pick and choose what you want to keep things very small and concise. So I'm going to give you a quick example of this. So let me connect to my actual mobile device. Sorry, I need to restart this. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen, and we'll go into our demo app. So what I'm going to be showing you is our social network authentication template, and basically what this does, and I'll explain more of how it works, but what it's going to do is I go and see, I click login with Facebook. It's going to take me to Facebook's site. Facebook is going to be like, hey, this application is trying to access your Facebook information. Is this okay? I say okay. I come back to the application. in the background, all I'm doing is pulling the user information. I see if the user has registered for my application. If not, I take them to the registration page. If they have, then I automatically log them in. So we can completely log in purely through Facebook, and we don't even have to worry about it. So the way this works is we use a custom plugin that someone out there in the Cordova community developed. What this does is this will use the different Facebook SDKs depending on what device you're on. So on Android, it'll launch the Android specific one. iOS, it'll launch the iOS specific one. And so what this will do is just go out and I basically say, try to log in with their Facebook, and say, if they say yes, then I come back, validate that authentication. Then after I validate the authentication, I pull basically their Facebook account ID. It's their unique ID. And I have this kind of saved in my database of my test application. And basically, if they're already registered, then I log them in. If not, I take them to registration, and once they register, I tie their account to that number. So one thing that this does require is you setting up an actual Facebook application. With Facebook, you have to kind of do this because there needs to be an app ID and things tied to this, and you need to tell Facebook what URLs they're allowed to access. And this is kind of a security measure, or to prevent anybody from accessing any application. But the web client template contains all the JavaScript needed to use this plugin. And how did I know what JavaScript was needed? Well, all of these Cordova plugins have very good documentation. So here's my template. And if you've ever looked at a web client mobile template, this should look pretty familiar. All this is a simple button. And instead of launching the pressed events in Plex, all I'm doing here is I run this JavaScript function, Facebook login attempt, and I attempt to log in. And if it succeeds, then I call Facebook login success. I set the user ID to another field so I can access it in Plex, and then I launch the updated event. And if I actually show you in Plex, one thing that's kind of cool is the Facebook login button is actually just a field in Plex. That's all it is. I did this because I wanted to be able to save that user ID and keep track of all these other things and launch separate events. So with web client, you have web client mobile, you have the ability to display things in any way you want and have them be something totally different in Plex, which is kind of cool as well. So if you've ever looked at a web client mobile template, this should not really be all that foreign. So let's move on. Another example is that uses a couple of Cordova plugins. We're able to access the device's camera, the save photo library, and also the actual device hard drive to upload these things. So basically, we just had to install two plugins from Cordova, the camera and the file UI one. And then we have just normal JavaScript. And once that's complete, everything else, all the things that are handled after you upload, are handled completely through Plex code. There's nothing else that's doing after that. So I'll go ahead and show you an example of that template. We have camera upload. And so this should look pretty similar to any other button. I'm just doing a lot more stuff in the handler. All I'm doing is I try to go get the picture. If it works, then I go to on camera success. On camera success, then I go get that image from where it's saved on the device, and I try to upload it. This may look a little confusing at first, but once you compare it to documentation, it's very simple. All I had to do was use the exact documentation and just sub out a few things with just whatever custom markup that I wanted to use. So here, let me go back to my device, and I'll try to show you this working in real time. And it looks like my reflector is running a little slow. So here, I'll go ahead and stop it again. All right, here we go. All right, so we're in my application. I'm going to, in my test application, I have the ability to report issues with things that were shipped to me. So if something was shipped broken, I can take a picture of it and say, hey, there was a problem. So here I'm going to pick this one. I'm going to say the items were damaged. It's broken, and I'm going to go ahead and take a photo. And you're going to see a lovely photo of my ceiling fan. I'm going to say I want to use this photo, and it's uploading in the background right now. So I'll have to, at this point, all I have to do is hit submit. Whoops, sorry, change my device orientation. Hit submit, and you can see it's actually loading kind of slow because normally I would change this to upload a thumbnail version of this, but I got kind of lazy for this demonstration, just uploaded directly from the camera. But also in the device template, in the control template itself, you have control over the photo quality that you want to even take or upload as well. So you can see my lovely photo of my ceiling fan here. All right, so back to it. So those are just a couple of examples of device-specific things and how you would want to implement them. Cordova's documentation is very good, so I encourage you, if you want to check it out and see some of the things you can do out of the box, you can. Also, you can look at their plugin community, which is fantastic. Okay, so another question, once you deploy things to the phone or the tablet or whatever, and you have things out in the device store, the question is, I have to make a change to my app. What do I change? Do I have to redeploy the app to the App Store? Or do I have to just change my WAR file? I mean, what change delegates what file I have to change? Well, there's a pretty good rule on this. So the only time you need to change things with what's in the App Store and what's on the device is if there's an actual specific change to the Cordova device. So you want to change the icon that's installed or the name of the app that's installed, you would have to redeploy to the App Store. But if you wanted to add new plugins, remove plugins, change permissions, add, remove, whatever, or you need to change the actual server address that your WAR file is deployed in, those are the situations where you need to redeploy the app to the App Store. Other than that, things that are just Plex, on the Plex side alone, all you have to do is rebuild your WAR file and redeploy it. It takes 30 seconds, and you can have all new functionality out there, and the user never has to know anything changed. They don't have to do anything. They're automatically getting all of those things. So that's a real advantage to deploying with the web app deployment and then wrapping the application and connecting from there. So that's all I really had to talk about today, but I do love discussing the subject of mobile development, especially going from a Plex environment to the mobile environment. So if you have any questions, you can reach our support site, support.cmfirstgroup.com, or you can reach me directly at Abram, A-B-R-A-M, .Darnitzer, D-A-R-N-U-T-Z-E-R, at cmfirstgroup.com. I'd be more than happy to answer all of your questions. Thank you so much for listening, and have a good day.